Welcome to the Relentless Redstorm, where debate becomes energy, energy becomes culture, and every fan has a voice. I'm Jason Safford, and alongside my partner in the storm, Derrel Jazz Johnson, we bring you the pulse of New York, the pride of St. John's, and the relentless heartbeat of Redstorm Nation. Tonight, we're diving deep, not just into the game, but into the soul of the city that breathes it. Because here in New York, fandom isn't just passion, it's identity. And when that first whistle blows, you're not just watching, you're part of the storm. Let's debate, let's get connected, and let's get relentless. All right, Derrel. 3 big wins in a row. 2 big road victories, and then a statement at home against Marquette. Some wins feel good, others change posture. Tuesday night, I felt the crowd was into this game, even though it was less of a crowd than usual. It was a Tuesday night. But I felt the electricity in the crowd, like they felt something is changing in this team. What's your take?
I'm really optimistic. Um, you know, three three wins. You know, remember, I'm the one that said I would like them to run the table for the rest of January. So far, so good. Three wins in a row. But and I do like Dylan Mitchell. I don't know why um Patino waited so long to make that change. I mean, at one of the games at Corner Arena, he compared him to Steph Curry. I literally said there are two people that I would pay to see, Steph Curry and Dylan Mitchell, which is a bit absurd to a certain extent, but to then, name him a co-captain, but leave him coming off the bench when we have seen how influential he is on basketball court, particularly with his energy on the defensive end. It seems like a move that should have been made before, but we're here now. I'm glad that we are here. He certainly helps to improve the rebounding. Again, Zuby's not rebounding the ball the way I would like him to. If I'm not mistaken, Dylan was the leading rebounder again yesterday with 8. Um, but he has clearly made an impact in the starting lineup. That is where he should stay for the foreseeable future. And now, with the 3 game winning streak, all impressive victories, all by double digits. Um, uh, at Villanova, it's a tough game on Saturday. So, let's turn this 3 game winning streak into a 4 game winning streak, and this 4 game winning streak into a 5 game winning streak, and have this conversation next week and see where this team is. Because these are tough games. Seton Hall lost a tough one to the now ranked Seton Hall Pirates, and they may fall out of the top 25. They are 25. But they did play UConn very tough at the Rock at Prudential Center last night, but fell a little short. But that's UConn, top 5 team in the country. Um, so that's going to be a tough game. At Villanova is going to be a tough game. So the Johnnies have 2 tough ones coming up back to back. Can they win both games? Absolutely, they can. Can they lose both games? They certainly can. Um, so we're going to see if this team has truly improved, because the improvement you will only see against the better teams. If they have truly improved, we'll see it with the wins against Villanova on Saturday and uh, against the Pirates at MSG on Tuesday.
Absolutely. I think going back to a statement you made about Dylan Mitchell being, one of the most exciting players that Rick Pitino's ever coached, and one that he would actually pay to see. The interesting thing about Patino, he did this last year with Kadari Richmond. He did not start Kadari until late December, early January, and obviously, St. John's started rolling. So this seems to be a pattern of Patino with some of his players, and you may see it again in the future. Next year we don't know what next year holds, but what I will say is that the impact that Mitchell has had on this team now being inserted into the starting lineup has been tremendous. And going back to Butler and then Creighton and now Marquette, in all three games, the impact was felt not only in terms of what Mitchell brings to the team, but the energy that the team then fed off of in terms of how they played in each game. So, what I'm talking about is that number one, Mitchell brings more energy, and you could see more energy in St. John's how they started in each game. The big takeaway from this game against Marquette last night was that Marquette was incredibly physical. They came out really, pushing St. John's, doing their best, and they're a young team. But St. John's got up right away, and that did not phase Marquette. They came at them, no matter what, the situation was. And Dylan Mitchell was the grounding force that, he was constantly just, combative and, going after every loose ball, making all of the plays that don't make it into the stat sheet, but do make it very, exciting for the crowd as well as the bench. And I think that's what, you really see is how the St. John's bench now has contributed in the last three games. And Patino's biggest issue last night, interestingly enough, in the post-game conference, he got combative with the press about who to play. It was actually kind of funny that he was asking, some of the press, who would you want me to play? I'll take this. I'll take it from you. Should I, play Lefteris and Prey over, Zuby and Hopkins? And the guy said, well, no, that's not what I'm saying. It's like, okay, well then I'll stick with what I have, because the challenge that Patino has now is he's got a lot of guys fighting for minutes. And the competition is a good competition because everybody's determined to perform at a higher level. And I think that's what Patino was going for. And, you actually, talked about the cauldron. I think the cauldron is red hot right now.
Hard for me to say it's red hot. It that Providence game was such a bad loss. Uh, still have a bad feeling about what I saw in the court that day. It's rare that I am shocked by the outcome of a basketball game. I was completely shocked by that because um they were up big, up double digits early in the game, and I thought this is gonna be a blowout. And then Providence hung in there, and then I'm like, okay, it's not gonna be a blowout, but it's gonna be a gutsy win that they can learn stuff through. And then they lost. Um And so, and that team is still there. I don't think that team has totally disappeared. They are obviously the most important thing is the win. Um, um, I think where Dylan Mitchell and Hopkins also had 8 rebounds. Zuby had 7. Zuby is not dominating the boards the way I would prefer him for him to do. Um, but the combination of those three guys are combining to get those defensive rebounds that this team has needed desperately. So that was something that was fixed. The point guard situation is still up in the air. Ian Jackson, only 18 minutes, only 4 points. Dylan Darling, uh, 7 points. He actually played more than Jackson, which continues to perplex me. Um, how Darling is getting more minutes, but it's in a win. I think again, you got to play your most talented players, and that's clearly Jackson. And if he's not on the floor against these better teams, and Villanova is that, Seton Hall is that, it will show. Um, Again, I am really looking forward to these two next two games. Of course, we have UConn twice in February as well, but we will learn a lot about this team. Saturday, undefeated in the Big East on the road. Let's see if they can keep that up against Villanova, and then taking care of home court. At that Providence game, there was a surprisingly loud number of Providence fans. I mean, Patino said it was 50-50. It certainly wasn't 50-50. And in post-game press conference, it certainly wasn't 50-50, but I was shocked when I heard so many people, what we said. I'm shocked. I'm hearing all of these Providence voices behind me. Of course, there was a whole row of Providence people in front of me as well that were celebrating, which it's interesting to see in the press. But there are a lot of Providence fans. I hope the Johnny's fans show up in force. I don't want to see the same thing repeat on Tuesday with more Seton Hall fans rooting for the Pirates than I expect. But certainly these next two games, and they come in a short period of time. Saturday, then days off, then Seton Hall. We are going to learn a lot about this team with these two games. Definitely both winnable, but again, both losable as well.
It's easy for complacency to slip in at any time, and I think that's one of the things that this St. John's team has to guard against is getting comfortable and complacent. They play very well with their backs to the wall, as Patino talked about. And in this game, they came out on fire, not just offensively, but defensively in terms of how they shut down Marquette. I think that, again, the attitude that they had the last two games before this one in Creighton and Butler had to do with being on the road and needing those wins. Now, they go up against a Villanova team that's also, really hot. And, they have some good matchups. I mean, the reality is that they have a really solid big man in Eric Dixon. They have, a great scorer in Lindsay. It's going to be a very, very exciting game, no doubt. Obviously, I am sure Villanova is going to be prepared just based on how St. John started the season, in the rankings, and how the game has changed, or their game has changed, and their play has changed over the course of the season. And Villanova is off to a tremendous start. I don't think anybody expected Villanova to have quite the start that they have, the same as Seton Hall. Obviously, Seton Hall is the real surprise, but Villanova's right there. And this game is going to be absolutely pivotal, as you pointed out. It would be great if St. John's can come away with a road win again, and then they have Seton Hall next Tuesday. I think the excitement for the fans, obviously, is that there's some momentum and some cohesiveness. There's definitely some value in terms of the way in which this team is playing now. 92-68 is not a close game. And the reality was that this game was over by halftime in many, ways. And, Marquette came out with fight in the second half, but it never was really, that close. And St. John's just continued to build and build a lead. So they won by 24, and it was a very solid sort of runaway 24 points by the end. Um, I think that's a big sign because again, Marquette is having a tough season, but they are coached by a tremendous coach in Shaka Smart, and they played. I don't think anybody's going to know this from the score, but they played really, really hard. St. John's had to make a lot of tough shots last night.
I agree. Shaka Smart is a proven coach in the NCAA. Marquette just doesn't have talent this year. Um, but there are, I mean, looking at this schedule, Villanova, Kevin Willard has returned to the Big East and is at the helm at Villanova. Then you have uh, uh, Shaheem Holloway at Seton Hall. You're going to see him. Then Richard Pitino. Rick will coach against his son the following Saturday. Um, so there's really not a day off, especially when it comes to the sidelines in the coaching matchup. Um, in the Big East, there are 5 games on the schedule before they faced UConn one of 2 times in February. For me to begin to get back on the bandwagon confidently, I would like to see this 3 game win streak morph into an 8 game win streak. So this team is playing its best basketball this season when they face the Huskies at Madison Square Garden. Um, we'll see if that will happen. Certainly, Butler will want payback when they come to the Garden uh, on the 28th. DePaul will want to win on their home floor after I believe that game is at Carnesecca after uh, the Johnnies took care of DePaul here. But I do think these are winnable games. Some games more winnable than others, but seeing that 8 game winning streak before facing Villanova for the first time this season would make me confident. I'm sure an 8 game win streak would put them with tough wins over Villanova and St. Paul would put the Red Storm back in the top 25 as well. So that's what I would like to see. That's what I feel like I need to see to start getting back to um, what I thought the ceiling could be, and more importantly, what the AP voters thought when they put St. John's as number 5 in the preseason poll. Um, those were very lofty expectations. I think a lot of people have jumped off that bandwagon now. Um, Certainly, they haven't done anything on the court that would make you think that we should still believe that is realistic. But winning these games on the road and at home would certainly help me get back to feeling that this team could have a deep run in the NCAA tournament. I'm do not want to be fooled again.
Okay, well, the skeptic in you has definitely come out in full force. I see it a little bit differently, but then, again, I'm just looking at it more from the reality of basketball seasons and how they go up and down, especially with Rick Pitino teams. Uh, he demands a level of, uh, relentlessness. Obviously, our podcast is based on that, but it's something where it takes players a while to really buy in, and that was one of the things that he did say last night, and it resonated very accurately that when it came to Sannon and Jackson and Lefty and Darling, that they still haven't fully bought in. to his style of, preparation, scouting reports. They're still missing, certain things on the scouting reports, doing the homework, doing the preparation. That was his one negative, that he really sort of dug in on last night in the post game. Otherwise, he was, full of praise, which he's been all season for this team. I do think that, there definitely has been something that's clicked. And, Uzziah Sellers last night was actually, very, very dialed in. Not only during the game, but in the press conference, you could just see that, he has taken on a different demeanor since the Providence loss. I think that he felt some accountability, in that loss for the way that, his shots didn't fall down or he didn't take them. But, I think the Providence loss definitely had an impact on these players. And just how much they dial that in when they need to going forward. So if it's a close game against Villanova, it's being able to recall that loss and use that as catalyst to drive them forward. And the good news is that they have that. Villanova doesn't have a loss like that. UConn doesn't have a loss like that this season. And that's one thing that St. John's has going for them, is that they have some really, really painful losses, which that they can recall and say, hey, we don't want this to happen again. So to your point of, St. John's being able to run the table in January and, hopefully, February as well, the momentum is there. The accountability is there. The players are definitely elevating their game to be able to, deliver what, you're hoping for, as well as what I think St. John's fans are hoping for. Now, again, with each game, we have to see how they play, whether they keep it up, whether they, raise their level with every game, because that's really what it's going to take going forward, is that whatever intensity they brought to these last three games, they now have to elevate it for Villanova. Then they're going to have to elevate it again for, Seton Hall. Then again for Xavier and, Butler and UConn. There is no, game on their schedule for the rest of this year where they don't have, to elevate it. They do not have the opportunity to take a break or let their hair down. Now, what I'll say is that what Pitino did last night, and this is, again, a credit to his strategy, the reason why you didn't see Ian Jackson more, most of the starters were on the bench, except for Ejiofor, for most of the game, because they were up, and he could play other guys. Kevin Odie saw a good, significant amount of minutes, which I was delighted to see Kevin Odie, get an opportunity to play. I think he's got great potential going into next year. He's, obviously, trying to find his way into, being a contributor. But, the second string, was, doing really well last night. Pitino didn't say, he wasn't, particularly happy with the fact that Prey only had one shot and didn't do enough scoring. But Ruben, was absolutely holding the defense down and, playing, tremendous aggressive defense at times that, I was sure the refs were going to, give him a call because the refs were trigger happy with the whistle last night. But, as much as, the starters got some foul trouble, the subs came in and, held it solid. And I think that was the best part about the game last night was, really how well the second string, played, and held on to the lead, didn't let Marquette get close. I mean, they got the lead down to 5, but you never felt like the game was within reach for Marquette.
Sellers did look great yesterday. I played a team high 35 minutes, scored a team high 24 points, and if I'm not mistaken, 24 is a season high for him as well.
Yeah.
Um, I just think that with Ian Jackson, and his draft stock continues to fall, but he is a very talented player that is expected to be playing in the NBA, probably next season. Um, this team, the cauldron can't totally work if you don't figure out a way to get him to play um, much better basketball. And that's not happening. And I think the only way that's going to happen is if he plays. Um, and based on the amount of minutes he plays, it appears that Rick still doesn't fully trust him. And that's worrisome because now we're in the second half of the season. It's still relatively early in the Big East season, but we have officially passed the halfway point. Um, with Johnny standing at 12-5 and having played 17 games so far this season. I would like to see that. Hopefully, we see it on Saturday. Certainly, it's great to see different players step up. Um, you know, that makes your team dangerous when you can't just say, okay, if we can shut down Zuby, we're gonna win, because um, Sellers can have a big game, Hopkins can have a big game, uh, someone off the bench like Ruben Prey or Leo Topulus can have a huge impact just by scoring into double figures off the bench. So this is not the easiest team to prepare for when you're playing against them, but um, these upper echelon teams are the ones that St. John's has not been able to beat this season. So I want to see those matchups. Those matchups are the ones that I'm ready to see, and let's see how this team holds up against the likes of Seton Hall, the likes of Villanova, and then twice next month, UConn.
Yeah. All right. Going into the Villanova game in detail, Patino's had a big lineup for the last three games that has done very well for him. Do you see him continuing to go with that big lineup? Do you see any changes from Patino going forward that would be surprising, or do you think that he's found his starting five and now it's just a matter of mixing and matching during the game based on the matchups and who he thinks is really going to make a difference?
Yeah, I believe he's found his starting five for the rest of the season. Um, barring any injuries, I think Zilby with Hopkins, Mitchell, Sandin, excuse me, no Sandin, shooting 35%. Sellers and Ian Jackson, I think that's the starting five. I think that's probably your best starting five. Um, we had talked about possibly bringing in Ruben Prey um, to add size and to add rebounding. Ruben Prey is not a great rebounder. Um, so he definitely adds size, but it appears that Mitchell was a move that needed to be made because Mitchell is certainly a credible rebounder. Again, I think two of the last three games he has led the team in rebounding, and that's what was one of the biggest flaws of this team. Rebounding, defensive rebounding, and the point guard position. It appears that the defensive rebounding problem has been solved. Um, let's see how the point guard position treats us going into the next couple of games.
Yeah, I think that he said it last night in the post game conference that Dylan Mitchell is a point forward. I think everybody realizes that Dylan Mitchell is really the point guard for the team in a lot of ways. And Patino seems to be very comfortable with him and Bryce Hopkins really being the guys that bring up the ball the majority of the time, until uh, Jackson gets more comfortable with the role, which we probably will see going into the UConn game, and more in February. We'll see how he tightens this group of guys. I think that's the thing, and I'll let you have the last word, but I think that the theme for the rest of January going into the game against UConn is really about tightening up. And I think that's what has happened is that they got casual against Providence, and that was their downfall. And that collapse, is now the stain that they get to, carry on their shoulder, or on their shirt. And, it's a reminder going into every game. Hey, listen, we already let this happen once. We're not going to let this happen again. The excitement, I think, for the fans, the excitement I have for how Patino is putting this team together. I think, going into this Villanova game, it really is going to be how do they keep improving. For example, the big thing they had against Marquette was turnovers. Marquette does not turn over the ball. Marquette had 19 turnovers. Shaka Smart even said it in the post-game conference, how he was shocked at how badly they did with the ball, but he gave the credit to St. John's. St. John's has done that all season. One of their big things, Patino basketball, is deflections and getting loose balls. And the last three games they have dominated in terms of fast breaks, loose balls, getting out on the floor. They've also shot the ball much better in the last three games, so that's going to be one of the things that we have to look for against Villanova. What happens if they don't shoot well? What happens if they have another tough offensive night? How are they going to come back with better defense and shut Villanova down? Because Villanova is also scoring close to 90 points a game. That's I think one of the big things is that Butler and Creighton were high-scoring teams. St. John's shut them down. Marquette, not so much, more dramatic because St. John's was able to score, their average and keep Marquette, in a very defensive position. So now going to Villanova, I think the thing to look for is how does this team respond based on not shooting well? What do we look for in terms of the team staying together and sticking with it to get into a dogfight and scrap out a win if they're not on all cylinders offensively.
Cautiously optimistic. Um, the cauldron is coming together, but it would do a lot for this team psyche, for the psyche of the fans, for them to beat good teams, teams that either are or have been in a top 25. Uh, they have taken an 0 for so far this season. Um, and well, with the exception of Creighton, because Creighton was ranked in the preseason poll. They were top 25. Not sure if they've been back, but they were top 25 when St. John's played them. They were out of it, but Villanova was recently in the top 25, I believe. Seton Hall is there now. I want to see this team beat a quality opponent in the top 25, near the top 25, and that will make a big impact on me. I have not given up hope, um, though I will say I'm not even thinking about winning a national championship. At this point, let's get to the tournament. Let's get to the second weekend of the tournament and see where things fall from there. But this team has the ability to change that confidence. I see Patino with the Cauldron, you know, Bench players may not always be consistent with scoring, but the effort is non-negotiable. He's getting that effort off the bench. He's getting that effort from the starters. Let's see that continue. And may the chips fall where they may in Philadelphia on Saturday against Villanova, and on Sunday back here. Excuse me, on Tuesday back here against Seton Hall.
All right. This wasn't the end of the story. It was a moment the story had to leave home. Subscribe, debate it, and tell us, did the habits hold or do they still need to travel? As always, stay relentless.